Thank you very much for that very kind introduction, and thanks to all of you for your kind invitation to me and my colleagues from Arizona State University to have the opportunity to come here today and talk to you about green development and participate in the green conversations. I should begin by saying that I arrived on Monday around midnight, and this is the first time to be in Guyana. The very first time. Thank you. And we've been delighted with our stay here, with the people that we've met, the hospitality, the rain. And let me explain that, because that's a serious comment. Keep in mind that Arizona State University is in the desert. And if we're lucky, we get to see rain maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So when we travel, we don't look forward to sunshine. We like the rain. And you've been very good at providing that this entire week. I'm also very pleased to be in Linden. This is also, needless to say, the first time to be here. And we're delighted that so many of you would come out to participate in this conversation. And I was also very pleased to hear the introduction from the gentleman from the City Council talking about innovation and the innovations that have come from Linden, because a little bit later I'm going to talk about innovation and how Arizona State University feels about that. I'm going to try to cover 3 subjects very briefly, and I'm going to keep the remarks relatively short because I believe in fora like this, it's the conversation that matters. But I'm going to touch on 3 things. One, I'm going to say a little bit about Arizona State University, who we are. Then about the Guyana Resilient and One project that Conservation International is leading, because that's why we're here. We're here because of that project. And then finally, I'm going to spend the majority of my time talking about the subject tonight, which is how should you be thinking about oil revenues when your emphasis and the emphasis of the country is on green development and green growth. So beginning with Arizona State University, we're the largest university in the United States. We have about 104,000 students that come to our four campuses. 75,000 of them do come to classes. Another 29,000 take courses and get their degrees online. Needless to say, because of the size of our student body, we have a very large faculty. We have about 4,000 faculty members and senior staff members, and another 8,000 or so people who support the university and support the work of the students and the faculty. Arizona State University takes the idea of sustainable development very serious and sustainability very serious. And in speaking about sustainable development specifically, it is both sustainable and development. And what I mean by that is it's extremely important that when we talk about sustainability, we also need to be conscious that there are many populations in this world that need to continue to develop. In fact, in my view, sustainability means man and nature thriving indefinitely into the future together. Man and nature thriving together. And so looking at the idea of thriving of people, one of the things that we are conscious of at Arizona State University, that at least in the United States, one of the best indicators of how a household will do is if someone in that household has a college education. That being the case, we are deeply committed to the idea of, as a public institution, bringing students into the university, helping them learn, and graduating them. So, unlike some universities that will boast, we have 15 applications for every student we take, Arizona State University says, if I have 15 applicants, I'm going to try to take you all. We will do our very best to take any student that meets our input requirements, our standards for admission. And unlike most Tier 1 research universities, and I'll describe what that means in a moment, we will take B students. And we think that's important because there is nothing that dramatically different between a good B student and an A student, and certainly not enough to deprive them of a college education. So we will do our very best to admit students, including B students, and that is not precluded by the fact that we are, in fact, a Tier 1 research university. We spend about $600 million a year doing research. Of those schools that do not have a medical school and do not have an agricultural school, and we do not because we started as a teacher's college many years ago, we're in the top 3 in the United States for expenditures on research. And that research covers a very wide range of subjects, but always has the idea of sustainability embedded in it. In fact, our president is very, very committed to the idea of sustainability and requires all of our colleges and all of our schools to have sustainability built into their curriculum in a way that's appropriate for them. We also have a School of Sustainability. We're among the first in the world and the first in the United States to have a School of Sustainability. It took us a while to convince ourselves that that was a good idea, because we were concerned about what work would these students do when they graduated. But I'm very pleased to say now, 12 years on from the formation of the school, 95% of our graduates from the beginning until today have jobs. And more than 70% of those jobs are in sustainability. What we hadn't really taken into account, and I think this is very important for Linden and for Guyana as you think about your future, is that the big corporations and corporations of all sizes, frankly, not just in the United States but around the world, have come to the realization that sustainability needs to be a core value for them. They have to think deeply about where the world is going and how they are going to respond to it, and sustainability needs to be an important part of that. So more than 50% of our graduates are going into business, and they're there as sustainability experts helping companies understand what they should be doing. Now we have, in addition to the school that I described, we have a very strong relationship in my institute, the Institute of Sustainability, with all the departments and schools. So there are 500 faculty members at Arizona State University who are members of the Institute of Sustainability, and they come from all disciplines. So we have engineers, we have scientists, we have artists, we have people from English, we have people from religious studies, we have people from all manners of social studies. They're all part of the Institute. And what that enables us to do, and I think it's very important for anyone that is serious about the big problems of sustainability, is it gives us the opportunity to ask deep questions about the issues of sustainability as systems that need more than one discipline in order to think about them carefully. So in our group, and it's a small group, but we have Ed Gibson, who's with the School of Sustainable Engineering in the Built Environment and is an engineer. We have Jose Lobo, who is in the School of Sustainability, and he's a mathematician and an economist and social scientist. And we have Nalini Chetre, and she is in the School of Sustainability and jointly appointed to the School for the Future of Innovation and Society. She has a natural sciences background, but is also a social scientist. My point being, and I, by the way, am a chemist. So the point that I'm trying to make is, with this big group of people that we have associated with the Institute, we can bring a whole array of different skills together in a very transdisciplinary way in order to address the issues of sustainability. Now, the last thing I'm going to say about Arizona State University is that we're very committed to the idea that universities need to work with their communities. Universities need to be a source of knowledge. Universities need to be a source of ideas. Universities need to be good partners with their communities in finding out what are the nature of the problems communities have, what kind of approaches might be taken to deal with those problems, how can there be strong partnerships with business, with government, with local citizens to address those problems. Now that's important to us as we think about the GRO initiative, or Guyana Resilient in One. This is an initiative that started with Conservation International. They are working with the ExxonMobil Foundation, discussed how there could be a partnership that involved international partners as well as local partners to address the question of resiliency and address the question of how Guyana can move as one people into the future. And they discussed that with Arizona State University, and they also discussed it with the University of Guyana. And I'm very pleased to say that that group, Conservation International, the University of Guyana, and Arizona State University, have come to believe that there's a very important partnership that we can have together. And that, in fact, is why I and my colleagues have been here for this past week, to meet with the University of Guyana, to meet with government people, meet with business people, come out to communities. We were in Berbice yesterday, and we're delighted to be in Linden here today, to talk about what does it mean to approach green development, what could Guyana Resilient in One mean. And what makes me particularly pleased by these interactions is the level of enthusiasm that I've found every place we've gone, and in particular at the University of Guyana. The faculty are unbelievably committed to this country and to their students, and have really, really good ideas about how Guyana can move forward resilient in one. We had a very good meeting with the Manufacturing and Services Association to talk about business and business's ideas. And they were also talking about the importance of the green strategy and green development. And we're telling a lot about the kind of things they need to support their businesses going forward and how universities could go about doing that. So I'm pleased to say that we're making good progress on this initiative. We're going to be hosting the University of Guyana and Conservation International at Arizona State University in the next month or so. And I'm very conscious and very, very confident that by the end of the year this program will be up and running, and there will be opportunities for us to interact with Linden and other cities around Guyana on how do we do this idea of green development. So I'd like now to turn to the idea of oil revenues and green development. And on first hearing, it may seem like, well, this can't be really true. You can't, on the one hand, be developing the oil industry, and on the other hand, committed to green development. But I'm going to make the argument that that's not the case. You can. And there's two points that I would like to make in particular. One, I would like to start with the idea of developing oil and gas offshore Guyana. This is new for Guyana, and the discovery is enormous. This is a huge oil province, and you've attracted the interest of some of the biggest oil companies in the world. In fact, you have attracted the attention of the biggest private oil company in the world, ExxonMobil. And I think it's right for the people of Guyana to be concerned, well, what exactly is going to happen out there? And I think it's right for the people of Guyana to be getting as much information as they can about what's going on out there and to be confident they understand it all. But what I do want to say is, having worked for a major oil company and as a fierce competitor of ExxonMobil, and I want to make this point, that my experience with ExxonMobil has been more as a competitor than as a partner, although we did partner with them occasionally. This is a really good oil company. They are exceptionally good at what they do. In fact, technically, there isn't another company in the world that is better than they are. We at BP used to say we are very good at technology, and we were, but we never said that we were better than Exxon. They have all the skills that are needed to develop the fields offshore of Guyana and do it in a very responsible way. And I will predict to you that they are going to work exceedingly hard to make sure they disrupt nothing. They'll work exceedingly hard to ensure that they don't spill any oil. They'll work exceedingly hard to make sure that they don't pollute the air. They'll work exceedingly hard to make sure that they don't disrupt the fishing or that they don't do anything that damages the beaches or any other part of the natural environment of Guyana. Now, that's not a promise that there won't be an accident, but I think it's useful to look up their track record. I was asked by the press earlier today in a conversation I was having with them about Exxon as a responsible business and whether they had learned or changed at all from Exxon Valdez. And I simply said to them, yes, they have changed a great deal. In fact, I can only think of one oil spill they've had in the last 10 years, which was onshore in the United States, and they behaved very responsibly in cleaning that up. So my message to you is you've got a very good partner in ExxonMobil. They are very competent, and they have every reason to want to be a good citizen in the way they behave with respect to Guyana. Now, that doesn't mean that you should ignore what they're doing out there by any means. It is important that the government develop the capability, and I know they are. We heard just a moment ago from the EPA. We met with the minister of the EPA. We've met with other ministers. They're working very hard to make sure that they can monitor what's going on out there and that it will be done well and it will be done in the way that ExxonMobil has promised to do it. You will need to develop those skills in order to do these sorts of things. The ministries will need to develop those skills. The University of Guyana needs to train people so they have the skills in order to do this. But these things can all be done. There's no reason why it can't happen here. It's happened in many, many other places around the world. So the first point I want to make, and I've just made, is that the fact that you've got oil development out there doesn't mean that you're going to have a real mess on your hands out there. I think, in fact, to the contrary, they'll do a good job. So that then raises the question of, well, what about the revenues coming onshore? And how should you think about those revenues coming onshore? And I'm going to start by saying two things about that, and then I'll elaborate a little bit. The first thing I want to say to you about revenues coming onshore is that you have not been handed a magic wand that's going to fix everything that you think needs to be fixed in Guyana. It unfortunately is not that simple. It is a large amount of money, but you're going to discover very quickly that there are a lot of needs for which that money could be expended. And it's also important, I think, to be very conscious of the fact that Guyana is not resource poor in the first place. Here you've had bauxite reserves, you've got forestries, you've had fishing, you've had excellent agricultural opportunities. Guyana is not resource poor. And while it's certainly true that you're going to have more money as a result of this development, it's not an unlimited amount of money. So as the government completes its thinking around the green development strategy, it's going to be very important for groups like this to engage in those public discussions about what do you want to do with that money, and how is the best way to achieve the goals of green development in Guyana in the context of having more resources. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. Now, the second thing I'd like to point out is that there are some very hard decisions that you're going to be confronted with. And in fact, I think one of the, in the introduction, one of the speakers pointed out the idea of the sovereign wealth fund and whether there should be a sovereign wealth fund. And if there is a sovereign wealth fund, what you should do with that money. And here I'm going to tell you that frankly it's none of my business what you do with it. And the reason I put it that way is you're going to get a lot of advice from a lot of different people about it. And if you get advice from people who are expert in sovereign wealth funds, and there are many sovereign wealth funds around the world, then it's useful to listen to what they have to say, at least what they have to say with respect to a fund. You may hear other people say, well, just give the money to us. That's what we did in Alaska. The state of Alaska, they gave the money to the people. And it's fine to understand what Alaska did and talk to people who are expert at that. But when it comes time to make a decision, it's up to you. Nobody can or should try to tell you how you should use that money. So again, I want to repeat, it's extremely important that groups like this engage with your government and have a very good discussion about how that fund might be set up, how it might be managed, how decisions might be made about how to use it. But it's a conversation you need to have among yourselves. Now, I'd like to say just a little bit about the idea of green development more generally. And again, I'm going to go back to this idea of green and development, because the reality is the human population is growing, and there are many people who need to develop. And so green and development isn't one or the other, it means both. I believe very strongly, as an energy guy coming out of British Petroleum, that the world is going to use a lot more energy at the end of the century than it does today. And we're going to do that because we have 10 billion people on the planet, and they are going to want to live, many of them are going to want to live better than they are today. But at the same time, what I'm going to tell you is that that energy can't come from fossil fuels. All fossil carbon, not 20% here or 50% there or 70% over there. All fossil carbon has to come out of the energy system. All of it. The only argument or the only debate is how fast. And certainly by the end of the century, it has to all be out. There are many people that believe that should happen by the middle of the century. So yes, we're going to be using more energy by the end of the century, but it's all got to be from renewable sources. The same is true for a number of other areas in sustainability. Water, we have to be much more careful about how we use our water. Food systems, enormous transitions need to come in our food systems. Transportation, urbanization, all of these big systems need to change. There needs to be development. People need to thrive with nature. But there also has to be investment, and there's going to be consumption. There's going to be consumption of more food in the future than there is today, too. So the challenge for us and the challenge for you is, how do we go about doing that? Because it's not enough to say we want to be green. That's a great place to start. But we also have to ask the question, how do people thrive while that's happening? And I'm conscious that there are many places in Guyana that are struggling with industries that are not thriving. And as a consequence, there are some populations that are seeing a decline in their standard of living. As we think about green development, I think there's a couple of points to keep in mind. The first is that the world is going to go green, and is going green. And the opportunity for the future in engaging with the rest of the world is going to be around the idea of how does Guyana participate in that green development economy. And the reason I'm emphasizing that is there is no advantage to you to try to go back to the old days, no matter how comfortable they felt or how appealing they felt. The future is about sustainability, and the future is about green development. So you're headed in the right direction. You've made a very important and great choice in deciding to do this. But now what we need to do is get right down to the nitty-gritty. Well, what can you do? How do you build on skills that you have? How do you do new things? How do you make products from Guyana more exciting? Some of your products, your food products in particular, go all over the world. How do we get more of the money to stay here? How can we add value to the resources that you have here? Now, I'm going to end in a way that I think is going to disappoint you a little bit, but it's the truth. And that is, I have no idea. And I suspect nobody else that's coming in from the outside has any idea how to do it either. But what I can say is there is a lot of people who are interested in how this gets done. I'm very impressed with the people at the University of Guyana and the kind of thinking that they're doing around how do we address exactly that problem. I and my colleagues are excited about the idea of being able to add our ideas to yours and be here working side by side with you. And I mean side by side with you because the people who are going to figure this out are actually in this room. The people who are going to figure this out for Linden are here. They may need and they may want some support from other places, from some support from the government, from the university, from Arizona State University, from Conservation International, from WWF and the other great partners that are part of this. You may be interested in having help and support from them, but the ideas are going to come from here. And the future is going to come from here. So let me just end by saying, again, we're delighted to be here. We're excited about the possibility of being able to work with Guyana. I'm really looking forward to the next time I can come back and meet with you here in Linden. So thank you for your time.